Barry? Barry! Wake up, Barry!
No, Boston, I'm not letting you lick the door Oh, Crawley, it's you.
Barry, I've got bad news. Really bad news. Worse than the time that dog urinated on the coal sieves.
Your story bank is dry at long last.
It's not a joke. I've heard word that Jerome is going to be cut up, scrapped, thrown into the scrap pile.
Oh, you are good for a laugh, Crawley. Okay. You don't have to stare me down to make your point.
I'll tell you this, Barry, that maintenance van is a thing of beauty. We've had it since Jerome's days, you know. I think it used to be a Midland coach at one point.
Yes, interesting you mention Jerome. I've heard some bad news about him.
Bad news? Oh no, what bad news?
Ask Crawley.
Can't you just tell me?
I could, but second-hand information is never usually reliable, Bunker.
Oh well, suit yourself then. No, oh no, oh say it isn't true, Crawley, please.
Oh, I only wish it wasn't, Bunker, but I heard it well enough.
How could they do this? Why? I don't know what to say. Oh, we have to do something.
Well, do you have any ideas? Anyone who'd be willing to fork out for him? I've heard of rich old engine men saving old moguls for 40 quid and a packet of crisps.
Oh, and I've just remembered. We've got a visitor coming to the railway today. Oh, I'm in no fit shape to chat now. Can I sleep in your shed tonight?
It's a nice idea. But, well, Otto's there, so I don't think so.
Bridget Horn it is then.
Manfred! Lovely to see you, my old mucker. Manfred? Don't tell me, Boston, did you used to work with this engine at Bromsgrove? You got it, Barry. Banker buddies, 1949 we were.
Oh, goodness. That takes me back. Oh, those were certainly fun days.
All we need is Big Bertha and it'll be a big Bromsgrove reunion, eh?
Well, I wouldn't know where she is. Hope she's okay.
First Bolton Barkington and now this Manfred character. How on earth do people keep finding us on this railway?
Well, it is one of the finest railways in the country. Who wouldn't want to come here?
That's not the point. It's who comes here I'm referring to. The Appy Valley Railway, where the past will always come back to find you somehow. So how did you come across this preservation society, Manfred?
After you left Bromsgrove, I was going to be withdrawn from service, but at the last minute I was bought by this kind group of gentlemen. We turned the country to look for a disused railway to call our own.
You'll always be welcome on the Appy Valley Railway, even though it's not exactly disused, but alas.
British railways are dropping railways like flies. Now you mention it, it's a wonder yours are still around.
We do have a coal mine. I suppose that's as good a reason as any to keep it open.
Too true. With BR's current attitude to steam, preservation will be the way of the future, mark my words. BR doesn't want steam anymore. Look at all the diesels being rolled out.
That doesn't sound right. Surely steam and diesel can coexist together, right?
That's what I once thought. BR doesn't want that though. Have you ever had any diesel visitors?
Don't tell him about Shindig, Boston.
Shindig?
It's not a pleasant story, but swiftly changing the subject, we're looked after very well by a man named Mr. Cardio. He'd never let anything happen to us.
As an employee to British Railways, he's just likely doing his job. Sorry, my mistake. Just when you've seen the sort of things I have, you're not as light as you once were.
I only wish I could relate.
I envy your perspective, Boston. Really, I do.
Live with Boston long enough and you'll find envying his perspective is a remarkable occurrence.
Boston, I have terrible news to report. Jerome, my old friend, he's going to be scrapped.
Scrapped? Oh, give over. That's about as plausible as starting a fire underwater. It's true, Boston. Crawley told us himself. At the shed, he's just taking up space, so if someone doesn't offer to buy him by next week, he's going to be cut up for spare parts.
Jerome was one of the first engines on the line. Oh, we can't let this happen. I'd sooner see my own frames rot than to see him go.
There has to be a way out for him. Yes, Jerome is such a special engine, and as historically relevant to our railway needs to be preserved. Why, a preserved railway group which preserves railway engines would be ideal to buy Jerome.
Maybe we could...
Take a look at him.
Yes?
Yes, indeed. Why didn't you just ask Manfred directly, Boston? What, and ruin the fun? Not everyone is a master inferrer like you are, although in your case you're more of a master inferior. Ha 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 ha! Someone give this engine a standing ovation, honestly.
I'm sure we'd like to see what this Jerome's like. We're always on the hunt for new acquisitions. Where is he located?
Tysley Sheds, but I'm sure Crawley could bring him to the junction and you could see him there.
They've got a turntable at the junction. That would be the best place to have him on show. Ugh, horrid things turntables are. They're awkward and inessential. I was caught by our worst enemy on one once.
Your worst enemy?
I think he's referring to Otto. He's this auto tank whose route is a connection with our junction station. And he's so annoying. He supports this organisation called the Buffers Out Movement. I mean, if you ask me, even the title sounds awful. What's it even supposed to mean? How do you have your buffers out? Worked fine enough for Sammy the Shunter. Ghastly engine.
I believe it was coined by the creator on a whim. Allegedly. I used to be part of it for a time, then I realised how daft it all was. I wouldn't be in a preservation group if I still thought it was sensible.
Who was it that created the Buffers Out movement? Do you happen to know?
From what I remember, the creator of the grip was a steam engine. Might have been a tender engine, but whoever it was, they went missing in the 1920s. Or not. Don't take my word for it.
It could have been an extraterrestrial from Area 51. Why would aliens want to create a movement for steam engines? Well, how can anyone know what aliens would like to do with their spare time?
I've just rang through to Crawley's shed manager. He'll bring Jerome to the junction for the sale later. Oh, I don't know what to say. I know what my father would say, that's for certain. Boston, do you remember what you're doing?
Yes, sir. I'm going to be Jerome's representative for the sale, then bring him back to Bridgethorn to let him see his old home one last time. And don't you fudge it, Boston. Have you any reason to doubt my professional capabilities? Mind if I present an essay for my response? Take it from an engine who had to be sold to this railway that you absolutely need to emphasise Jerome's best attributes. Why would they want to buy this engine, and how can you help them buy it? You know Jerome, you're familiar with him. You are also the most, how shall I put it, spokesperson-y out of all of us, and you were picked out of all of us to attend the Bridgethorn Steam Rally, so your word is surely going to be very valuable here. Very true, Barry. You know, I think I quite like it when you bolster my ego. Keep it up. I knew I'd despair of saying that. I suppose one other thing to consider. What if they don't want Jerome? What if they turn him down? Oh, Barry, don't be daft. They're a railway preservation society. Of course they'll want Jerome. They're falling over their feet for stuff like him. I suppose so. Maybe that is just the fear talking. Your confidence is truly admirable, Boston. Maybe I should bolster your ego more often. Can I have that in writing? Why, of course. As long as I have your exclusive permission to alter bolster to blister.
You're not seriously going to bring that old fart here for Boston to sell, are you?
What I do is none of your business, Otto.
Those Appy Valley engines are bad news, Crawley. What part of that don't you get?
They're greater friends than you have ever been. I'd live there myself if there was space.
I'm sure you would. Bringing Jerome to the turntable for him to be shown off like a used car. One that's impounded, I should say.
Maybe they might actually like the challenge of repairing him. They are preservationists after all. I've seen many industrials like myself in terrible conditions. And yet preservationists are still trying to, preserve them.
Knowing what I do about the history of that railway, I wouldn't be preserving a grain of ballast, never mind one of the engines.
Knowing what you do. Oh, knowing what you do. Knowing what you do. What do you mean by that? What do you know?
I mean, well, they're idiots, aren't they?
Oh, I see. So, nothing notable then.
Is that who I think it is?
Boston!
Waldo, Eves! How's it been since the rally?
It's been onwards and upwards for us. Invitations to rallies around the country have come flowing through the door. They won't be half as eventful as ours was, though.
What about the steam ruler? Looking for a real name, I should hope. I'm just on my way to the junction to do some selling.
I didn't know you liked selling things, Boston. Is this a side gig to your station pilot duties? Oh, good lord, you're not selling contraband, are you?
No. It's called the 1F Trust, and they've preserved an old friend of mine who used to work at Bromsgrove. I'm going to be helping them to buy an engine who looks a bit like me.
What's their name?
He's called Jerome. As I said, he looks a bit like me, but older. If this group doesn't buy him, he might be...
You mean he might be Maybe we should tell Mr. Gallius. You really impressed him at the steam rally. If this Jerome is anything like you, he'll probably...
I appreciate the thought, you two, but I think this team will have it all under control. Besides, Mr. Gallius probably wouldn't have the room for an engine like Jerome in his estate.
You're underestimating him. He can make space like it's no one's business. At least let us tell him, eh?
I suppose I can't stop you. I mean, you can go ahead if you want. I suppose it's the thought that counts.
Okay then, who's gonna tell him? Should be me, really. It was my idea.
Over my broken boiler. I should tell him first.
No, me!
Oh, brother.
Hello, Boston. Lovely weather, isn't it?
Yes, Jerome, are you feeling nervous at all?
What would I have to be nervous about? You're the one doing the selling, not me. I think so, anyway. I don't quite know what it's all about. I might just have a snooze on the turntable, if that's alright.
By all means, Jerome. Even if it doesn't work out, I can at least say I tried. But then again, this might be your only ticket out of a dire situation. You're far too important to be cut up.
Progress is progress.
Boston, believe me, I've had this discussion with him, and the idea of mortality doesn't occur to him. Anyway, I'll be taking him to the turntable now. Best of luck, boy. And, I'm here if you need me. Always. And even if you don't need me, I will just be in this siding. Watching.
Thank you, Crawley. Right, time to get my game face on, which is just my normal face, but ready for games. Anyway, time for the sale of the century. Roll up, gentlemen. Present before you is one of the most remarkable little engines you ever did see. Mountains will go on holiday before you see an engine as good as this. Jerome was a hard worker back in his young day, keeping the Appy Valley alive and well for many years by himself. His class are the predecessor to the popular, hard-working pannier tanks. I would know, I'm one of them. Whether it's popular or hard-working is up for debate, however.
Well, I wasn't completely on my own. I think there was an engine called Cheapstow I once worked with.
Temporarily, because Jerome's trustworthy nature and kindly attitude made him loved and adored by all the residents of the railway.
I think we had an argument and fell out.
Can I ask you a question? I think you just have, my good sir. Yes, side-splitting. Anyway, what work needs to be done to him for just £500? That's right, £500. You heard me clearly. Not even 700, not even 100, just £500. Jerome can be yours. A polishing, repainting and cleaning will be standard, but Jerome will require, first and foremost, a new firebox. His old one was damaged after the Second World War as he worked ridiculously hard to push himself and keep the railway running. Although not by himself, he had company at this point. The board of chairmen who looked after the railway was smart enough to realise that one engine couldn't do the work by themselves. But Jerome did alright, and he did it beautifully. Right, and what would we get out of Jerome if we brought him going forward? A whole wealth of interesting stories from the pre-grouping days of the Great Western Railway. He is also, believe it or not, the last of his class. He will have much in common with Manfred here. His purchase could open the doors for your society buying even more engines that are the last of their kind. Kinda interesting, isn't it? I see, and one more question. As an early Great Western engine, what would we want with this engine when we have so far only preserved things from the Midland Railway? Ah, yes! Well, Jerome, what would you say to that? Why would this team want a Western engine when they preserve only Midland stock?
I thought you were supposed to be selling me?
It could attract people who like the Western engines, and people who like moustaches, because Jerome's got a nice moustache. I mean, it made me envious when I first saw it, but I think that's all the time I have for today. We've reached a decision. We don't want to purchase Jerome. Sorry, you won't. Yes, as a Midland Preservation Society, we wouldn't have much use for him. But this engine is going to be scrapped. And you don't want to save his life? If it's any consolation, we could get him... Well, frankly, I am ashamed. Call yourself a Preservation Society. Whoops, getting personal for a moment. I meant to say, that's fine. Thank you for your time. Cheerio.
Boston, I'm sorry.
And you can bloody talk. Whoops. Sorry. Done it again.
You think I have any say in what they do?
Why didn't you say beforehand he was a Great Western engine? If it was that important, why didn't you ask if he was a Midland engine? I thought it didn't matter what engine it was. I thought preservation societies would be all the same.
Sorry, Jerome. I hope things turn out for the best for you. None of us want to see you cut up, by all means.
Got a funny way of showing it.
Crikey, I've just realised. You know I mentioned I was once part of the Buffers Out movement? Well, during my time there, I discovered that this exact engine knew who the founder was.
I should be surprised, but at this present moment in time, I'm incredibly apathetic to just about everything.
We'll be on our way now. Give Jerome my best wishes. Sorry it had to turn out like this, Boston. But it was nice to see you again.
You too, old friend.
And by the way, I didn't want to say this earlier, but I'm not exactly the last of my class. Sorry. Goodbye.
I'm must have dropped off there. Ugh. I quite enjoyed that spin on the turntable. Can I have another go?
Go on then, you old bean. Well, how did the sale go, Boston? Why, Barry, my good friend, it was so successful I didn't even manage to sell him. They didn't want a Great Western engine in their Midland Preservation Society. Sorry, Jerome, I failed you.
Failed me? Nothing of the sort.
I see. So the sale was a miss. Are you sure you didn't just fail to save your comment, Barry? I'm not up for it right now.
Jerome, you were a good mate.
You were saying, Bunker?
You were a good mate and I appreciated your time. It'll be sad to see you go.
What are you two doing here? Barry, Bunker, Joanna, this is Waldo and Eves. They were at the Steam Rally. But seriously, we're sort of in the middle of a pre-grieving process here.
Grieve no more. Mr. Gallows wants to buy Jerome.
What? He does? But he's a traction engine man.
He's always wanted his own steam engine. Jerome would be an ideal choice.
And he doesn't care about him being Great Western?
Absolutely not. He wants to see him right away.
I'm sure you'd love to run again, wouldn't you? I can make that happen, my friend. You know I've always fancied my own steam museum.
Steam museum, eh? Where are you going to get the money for that?
Yep, you're a keeper, all right. But for now, I'll settle for making you the star attraction of my Bridget Horn Steam Rally.
We got lucky here. Oh, Boston, honestly, it wasn't your fault they didn't buy him. It just seemed so ideal that they would be the heroes who would save him.
That engine was one of your old Bromsgrove friends, after all. I suppose your familiarity with him clouded your judgment.
If Mr. Galliers hadn't stepped in, who knows what might have happened for Jerome? Not every engine's going to get that privilege. Look on the bright side. At least now you've got a good opportunity to practice your marketing skills for future. This was a good experience, but an education at the Tidderminster University might be beneficial. If I can convince them to build some tracks to a lecture hall. And remember, don't get personal. I'm grateful Jerome's got a new home now, sir. Oh, I forgot to mention you two. Manfred said yesterday that Jerome knew the engine who started the Buffers Out movement.
My word, you're correct. The Buffers Out movement was started by the Appy Valley's first tender engine, a Dean Goods called Chepstow.
Chepstow? Chepstow? Wait, I think Jerome mentioned a Chepstow yesterday.
Chepstow was a hard worker for a time. Then when the First World War was due to start, Jerome thought it would be for the best if Chepstow joined his fellow classmates and go abroad to France to serve. Chepstow didn't agree with this, and they fell out over it. It wasn't just that though. My father later kicked him out of the railway for bad behaviour, and Chepstow subsequently formed the Buffers Out movement as a sort of engine rights movement, like the suffragettes, but not nearly as good. I don't know all the details though. My father's long gone after all.
Gordon Bennett, Jerome never mentioned Chepstow to me.
So that explains why Otto has held a grudge against us all this time. And all this time I thought he was just a cantankerous git for the sake of it.
This is an awful lot to unpack, sir. How come you never told us this ages ago, sir? Why didn't Otto ever say this? This has really knocked me for six, as the old saying goes.
I thought I'd forgotten before Boston asked me. It was like an old story my father delegated to me years ago. Either way, it's all in the past. It doesn't affect the present at all.
You're right, sir. And actually, that gives me an idea. Good morning, Otto.
Good? Far from it.
Looks like it'll be an even worse morning when I tell you what we found out. Does a Chepstow ring any bells?
So, You finally figured it out, eh?
I mean, you're an idiot. I've known that much for years, but you are a bona fide idiot through and through. All this time, instead of thanking us for your movement existing, you chose to antagonise us instead. Talk about biting the hand that feeds. Anyway, I should be off. Cheerio.
What a shame our little game is now over. Or is it?
When do you think he'll wake up?
Oh, heck! What was that?
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Honestly, you can be so impatient sometimes.
Good afternoon, Grandfather. How are you today?
Grandfather? Be off with you. So this is your fancy estate, is it?
Mm-hmm. You're quite a little bargain, Jerome. Your new firebox might be a little bit more pricey than you were, though.
So, if I have it right, I'm going to be preserved by your Mr. Gallius now, and he's going to have me at his next Steam rally?
You bet.
Welcome to the family, Jerome.
Oh, you two are lovely. Very polite too. I feel like royalty. Actually, that reminds me of the time I saw a king for the first time. You see, back in the early 1930s, where
By this
there
rate,
was
we'll
this
never
Great
make Market
Depression,
Boswell by the
we didn't know
weekend.
how to proceed because of how bankrupt